have design features that you feel like compensate for non-compliance does not mean that that would warrant the non-granting of a waiver if you find that there's an undue hardship on the applicant.
And I was not necessarily convinced by their arguments that it would not be an unnecessary hardship to configure the store a little bit differently, to comply with it.
So is there a way that we could put the parking lot in the back and still have like some sort of other entrance for the commercial trucks coming in? Because that's the one that that's where it gets me.
Yeah.
Well, the side, I don't understand why there's a parking lot on the side, and that's not just the delivery.
Oh, you're saying like the Anderson Street, the west side?
Yeah.
Okay, so entrance is there while having the ability to have the parking lot in the back and move Walmart a little bit closer to Broadway.
Yeah.
And
So what, they would have to come back with a completely different plan.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can
that sounds
recommend
like a new
that.
burden to me.
Possibly even rotating the entire building to face a different direction.
It may not even, be able to work with
And
what they,
that does sound like making them start over to twist the building around a little bit. Kind of sounds like it could creep into undue hardship, at least on the part of the applicant.
and Attorney Williams did say how it cost them more money to do different things. Maybe that would take away from what they could do for the community,
There are
different benefits.
also the closure, the street closures. I mean, they're eating the cost. This like it's not really going to impact the city in an adverse way. I don't think. Some though, a few of the members of the public did say something to the contrary, but there's sport as well.
We want to move on to the next one?
yes.
Yes, let's do it.
Alright.
The next one is the single entrance at the front of the store instead of complying with the code, which is 2 entrances or a corner entrance. So would this adversely affect the adjacent property owners in any way?
I
No.
don't
I think
think
that's
the
no.
property owners know.
Yeah, well, there's nothing in the YMCA lot, apparently. So that proposed development, would that interrupt that proposed development in any way?
No, sir.
Doubt it.
Well, I do know that the traffic report mentioned that the Y should move their entrance to be in line with Walmart. And it made it sound like that entrance was already set up almost, so I'm not, let me find out where it was one of the things that they asked. They said that should be complied with it. Okay.
And say it does. Say it does say that. Would it still adversely
Impact.
impact them?
Yeah, probably not.
No.
Okay.
Oh, so next point.
Well, wait, but maybe I'm confused on where the entrance to the Y is, because it sounds like it could kind of be congested if it's commercial vehicles only allowed to go in a certain direction to go park, but then you have people wanting to go turn left into the Y, right? That sounds like it
The
could be
Y isn't built yet.
Well,
so-
just from the traffic impact study, it just says, recommend the developer of the YMCA property realign their proposed south access slightly to the north to better align with the location of the proposed Walmart access. I guess, I'm wondering, would they be able to claim this is adversely affecting us because we have to change our plans because your plans don't fit with it?
Yeah.
I don't think so, but.
It's a possibility,
Yeah.
but we don't really know because it's not
Well,
built.
we can't say, we
Also-
can't speak for them.
Right.
Also, the trucks are coming in southeast, and then most of the cars, pedestrians are coming in that northwest area. So the YMCA is 800 feet from where the trucks enter, and then to the right up on Broadway, and then all the trucks are all the traffic's coming on the other side. So I just really don't. Like Commissioner Wiseman said, maybe the potential extra traffic, but it's just a possibility at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
Next point.
Second point.
Whether it violates the comprehensive plan.
Same arguments as last time for 3, 7, and 9.
The staff report says this one violates 1, 7, and 9, I believe,
Oh, okay.
of the comprehensive plan.
So one is it violates traditional form. And then 7, if I remember correctly, that has to do with parking as well, yes? The circulation and multimodal transportation. So a waiver for this one.
So the single entrance in the front that's number. I mean, number 1 says use existing or emerging forms. So you're saying traditional forms of development.
That would be, isn't that what the form or the district is right now? The
Okay.
traditional, you know?
Okay. Oh, I get what you're saying. So I mean,
I feel like this violates it. I don't,
So the entrance that they're trying to get rid of, I guess, more or less, that's the side, I believe, that faces where all the commercial trucks will be coming in, to try and dissuade use and entrance into the building on that side and funnel more people in directly through the front, where
Okay.
no commercial trucks are to enter. I think that's what they're saying.
so they want to
I've never
waive.
seen a Walmart with a super center with only one entrance though, in the front. There's always multiple on 1.5 or something. I just feel like-
There's generally 2 in front at least.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, in the front, like, opposite.
I don't think that's the issue, that there aren't 2 on the front, it's that they're supposed to be
Yeah, our
an
plan
entrance on
requires-
2 different streets.
Oh, okay.
So it's not that there aren't 2 entrances on the same street, it's that there needs to be, the plan would have them have an entrance on a different side of the building as well.
They would, so in order to abide by the code, it would have to have a entrance on that side where it's located now, one on the Dixie Highway side, or one at the corner of the building, like right there.
Yeah,
in the corner.
yeah.
Yes, and I think it's only one entrance that's the variation, right? Like they just want to have one, they want 2 instead of 3 entrances. If I remember correctly, I believe that's
Okay.
what it's really said.
So it's a requirement to have a building
I
entrance.
think it's still 1 out of 2, right? 'Cause
Is it 1 out of 2?
they don't need,
Yeah.
We can add.
right, they don't need it. They only have to have an entrance on both sides, on each street, so that would mean that they only need 2 entrances. They would still have 2 entrances, they'd just be on one side of the building.
So, for me, are we just focusing on number 1 at the
That's
moment,
probably
or is it anyone?
You
Oh, I
can,
Okay,
get
so
what
for
you're saying.
guideline 7, it's to ensure a balanced and comprehensive multimodal transportation network that is coordinated. I think not having 2 doors completely violates that one. It's meant mostly having just the one door on that one side makes it extremely difficult for public transportation and even multimodal transportation to have access to that Walmart.
Right, because I guess where the bus area is on the east side, there's an entrance there, correct? That's why they had that
Yeah.
purple road, so you have to go out of there, out to the front, and then into the front door that way.
And that wall also is literally just, there's, the front will at least have some movement.
where does the corner, they have a corner entrance, does it have to be in a specific corner of the store, or can it just be, if they had one in, they already have, they're gonna have 2 front entrances. One seems like it's gonna be pretty close to that corner, northeast corner of the store anyways, and there's a lot of green space. There's already a pedestrian walkway, there's a bus cutout. Why couldn't they just put a corner entrance right there? It seems kind of.
Excuse me, Commissioner. I just want to make a point of order on behalf of the applicant that they wanted it to be clear, there is in fact 2 entrances in the front.
In the front.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, okay. So the entrance on the corner, like you're saying,
That's the one that.
that's what we want.
That's the one that they want to axe.
And so we can do, we, okay.
Yeah,
So,
Keep this up.
guys, just real quick, let me just point out that it says, for guideline 1 at least, what we're talking about now, it says using existing, which would be the traditional form, or emerging forms. And if we think about the fact that there hasn't been a Walmart
It's
in this
emerging.
location yet, traditionally we have 2 entrances at the front of the Walmart. This could be an emerging form
Yes.
of,
I see.
you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Merging form consistent with goal 1 of the comprehensive plan.
And we can impose additional conditions or restrictions intended to mitigate the impact of the modification or waiver. So,
Like a well-lit sidewalk from the side street bus entrance to the front doors.
Fantastic. And I agree with Mr. Williams that this is the minimum necessary. Literally one less door. Don't really know what else. Don't really know how else to persuade by that.
yeah.
All right, so let's move to the next waiver.
Okay.
It's not listening.
There's one more
Next
waiver.
waiver.
Next waiver, go.
What is the last waiver?
The last waiver?
Yeah,
Oh.
The glass wall.
Okay, that's not gonna affect the adjacent property owners. We know that, right?
No, it's
Yeah.
not going to. I think it's the actual building itself and the type of applicant,
Yeah.
right? Even though the specific type of business that's there, it's unlike all other businesses that are adjacent to it. I
Exactly.
think that its uniqueness will show that, that it will not adversely affect the owners of the businesses that are near it.
100%. If I can skip down to the 4th box real fast, just to settle that one. So the strict application would cause an unnecessary hardship. They said that because the structure of the building can't really take the added glass. Let's come back to number 3. Extent of the waiver regulation, minimum necessary. Again, minimum necessary. The structure can't handle it.
And there's benefits with that of the business owners being in the front of.
Yeah,
Yes.
they can't add glass because the way the storage design is.
Yeah.
All the storage is designed that those leased out businesses are in the front, so that would be the back part of those businesses.
100%. Yeah.
Well, do we have any further deliberation?
Now, let's get this ruling on the road.
We didn't talk about the parking?
That was the first one,
They
right?
said we don't. No.
No,
He's
the-
talking about the road
road
closure.
closure.
That
The
was
boarding-
left for the
But we have to
Zone.
make a recommendation.
Well,
Yes, we do.
the recommendation.
I don't think, so the planning commission said that there does not seem to be a problem with any of the road closures. The property owners doesn't have any problems giving it, having the roads closed, and it won't affect traffic or anything. There really seems to be no,
Then they said they would pay for it, so.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we recommend that they can go through with that.
Yes.
All right. Seeing that deliberation has concluded, do I have a motion to vote on the first waiver?
I move that we grant the waiver for, let me find the number. Can we just call it the parking lot?
it's 5518A.
Yeah, I move to grant the waiver 551A3A because it does not adversely affect the adjacent property owners. It does not violate the comprehensive plan. The extent of the waiver of the regulation is the minimum necessary to afford relief to the applicant. And should I say strict application of the provision of the regulation would deprive the applicant of reasonable use of the land.
I personally think it could go, they satisfy both, in my opinion.
So now we vote.
We
Do I
need
have
someone
a
to second.
second?
I said,
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. So is there any further discussion before we move on to the vote?
No.
Okay, all in favor of the motion for waiver 551A3A, please say aye and also raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Alright, way to vote, 6 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion carries to grant the waiver on the street entrances.
I move that.
Parking, I apologize.
All right, I move that we grant the waiver, 551A1B, under the findings that the waiver does not adversely affect the adjacent property owners. The waiver will not violate the comprehensive plan. The extent of the waiver of the regulation is the minimum necessary, and I believe that the applicant has incorporated other design measures that exceed the minimum of the district to compensate.
I second that.
All right, is there any further discussion?
I do find that it does violate number 7 of the plan, because and number 9, it does not having 2 doors does not accommodate for balanced, comprehensive, multimodal transportation, and nor does it support transit and non-motorized methods of travel.
So would you like to add a recommendation that an
I think we
entrance?
still just.
That's just my finding. Like,
Okay.
I find it violates it.
Okay. Seeing that there's no further discussion, all in favor of the motion on waiver 551A1B, please say aye.
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 Aye. And raise your hand, please. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All right. And Ms. Chair, oh, sorry.
I vote 4-3. The motion carries to grant the waiver on the street entrances.
All right, Ms.
Was
Chair.
it- Apologies, was that to grant or deny? Because
That was to grant.
to grant?
Yes.
Okay, because I moved to grant. So
Yes.
Maybe I
Yeah.
went backwards? No?
No, you got it
We
right.
need to do a
Is that
revote.
Natalie and Dimitri against everyone else for?
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Ms. Chairwoman, in the same case, I'd like to make a motion that we approve that waiver from section 5.6.1.c.1 to waive the requirement to have 50% of the wall surfaces at street level consisting of clear windows and doors along West Broadway and Dixie Highway, using the applicant's justification that the mitigating factors of the extra shrubbery and the other design enhancements that they made to the plan are sufficient to justify the waiver.
I second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion for waiver 561C1, please say aye.
Aye.
With no opposition, that motion also carries, and the waiver is granted for the glass and wall range.
Do we need to vote on the recommendation or
No.
no?
All right, may I please?
Wait, legal counsel, do we need to vote on the road recommendation? I know we recommended it, but I think it needs to go on the record.
That does fall within your purview, so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you all can follow the staff report if you choose to reference that.
I think we should.
Well, I find the fact that since we have granted the variance, or not, I'm sorry, not the variance, the waiver regarding the parking lot, and the costs are going to be incurred by the applicant itself, it doesn't really seem like we should recommend against the closures. Because since the city is not getting some sort of undue burden from the deal, and an applicant Walmart is incurring that cost as well as the actual cost of construction and paving the parking lot in that area and the entrances, I move that we recommend the adjustment board, whenever they hear this case, to grant their request.
I second the motion.
So we're voting on-
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think we should.
Okay, all in favor of that recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, the motion carries to make the recommendation to allow the street closures by Walmart.
All right, may I please have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Second. Motion?
Third.
This meeting is now adjourned. The time is 9:08 and the next meeting
Great job, guys.
Stop, because your next step is to write a reflection paper, right? Everybody following me? Due Monday?
Sounds familiar.
Yes. Look at the syllabus. So, and do not be late with it. That's the piece that affects people. Whoa, so I'm gonna give you guys some feedback. Okay? And I know it's late, but here we are. But the other thing, you're not going to get any feedback between now and the time you write your reflection paper. And it will be a distant memory, right? By the time you're doing this, it's going to be some distant memory. So let me give you some overall feedback, even though I know it's going to take a little time. All right. Walmart. Okay, the Walmart team. I thought the presentations were highly effective. I thought the very detailed. The PowerPoints were very good, where you walk through each part of the plan, each finding that had to be made, and so on and so forth. And you really focused on redevelopment, safety, mixed uses, new workplaces, and hardship, and so forth. So lots of good stuff, lots of detailed facts. You really knew your project. It had just lots of information at your fingertips. So excellent job. There were maybe 3 or 4 little things. So first of all, you again, as we've talked about in the past, you did not lead with your frame. And so that was sort of a missed opportunity to just make a really powerful point that this is going to be a major redevelopment of a vacant and abandoned property that's a blight on the neighborhood right now. It's going to bring food to a food desert. It's jobs, and in that we are entitled to these waivers because we are meeting the codes and doing this for public safety. I mean, however you want it, but you get the idea. So that would have been, you summed up with it, and you summed up with it really well. Just don't forget to lead with it. It's helpful to do that. When you're talking to the commissioners, don't address them by their first name. That's maybe not such the most professional approach, and so forth. The one thing I thought you could have done a little bit more assertively is about there's just not going to be anything here. I mean, if we can't get these waivers, it's just too expensive to us. We're not going to do it. We're not going to put in, a Walmart up at the front with all this, multiple entrances off of Dixie Highway. I mean, that Walmart wasn't going to do it. I mean, and you saw that after there was an appeal, they just walked away from it then, even though they'd gotten all their waivers. So I think you don't have to. I mean, you don't have to be aggressive about it, because otherwise then you look like a bully, and you don't want to do that. But you can make a point more subtly that what you're doing is really pushing the boundaries of what you can afford to do, and it's such a better use than if the property continues to be vacant and abandoned. You kind of got to it at the end a little bit, but you could have just been a little bit more with that. But otherwise, all excellent. Louisville Metro. So lots of great structure and agenda and rules and so on and so forth, and lots of questions, very good questions, and so forth. Lots and lots of deliberation. Now I do think there was a point where some moves towards some motions might have moved you. I mean, I think at some point you were kind of saying the same things and so forth. But I mean, that's more. I mean, if you want to stay here and deliberating, that's fine. There were some things that got you into and if you denied Walmart, you actually would have been sued. There were some things where you went down the road of asking about or making a big deal about things that violate the what?
Zoning.
No, not zoning.
The,
No, what you have to have. Yes, I heard.
the Never mind, I don't know if that was.
Nexus, the land use nexus. Okay, how much they pay their workers, okay? People care in the public, I mean, right? I mean, it's a policy issue. It is not a planning commission issue. I'm so sorry, but it's, you know, that there is no land use impact, right? Who they give grants to. Okay, no land use impact. Okay, so there are good corporate citizens, there are bad corporate citizens, there are somewhere in between corporate citizens. Okay, whatever. But there's no land use impact in terms, I mean, now if they're giving grants to nearby land uses to mitigate their impact, okay, now you care about that, right? But just sort of, you know, is it going to be this food bank versus, you know, that homeless kids tutoring program? I mean, you know, that's not a planning commission decision. What was the? Oh, consulting with anybody locally on green space. Ooh, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Okay, if they provide green space, it does not matter who came up with the idea, right? You see, I mean, because again, there's no nexus. The nexus is the green space. And you know, and if it's, hey, these are not native plants, okay, that's a land use nexus. But you didn't use a local person, ooh, you're gonna get yourself into trouble that way, right? Does everybody follow from a legal standpoint why? Yeah. Now, I mean, you granted them the waivers, so actually now nobody's gonna sue. It's gonna be fine. But you just want to be careful, right? I mean, you got to differentiate between those, and then, you know, in the deliberations, you got kind of derailed in parking spaces. So again, that wasn't the issue, and Joe tried to pull you back from that. But also about the YMCA alignment. It's okay. It's just, you know, YMCA's not before you, right? I mean, so that's right. I mean, you know, they're not coming to you at the moment. So, you know, just try to stay focused on the things that are you are legally authorized to make a decision on. But you did a really nice job of really making sure you're making the findings according to each of the standards. So I thought that was very well done. Community group, lots of excellent presentations, very powerful. I mean, like just from the very outset, Jennifer said, my main point is, right, I framed it right up at the front, and lots of the presentations were really clear about what your main point was. They were all sort of different. Lots of facts and details, which I thought was very persuasive and very helpful. A couple of minor things. Cam and Kirk, you mostly read your presentations and didn't make a lot of eye contact with the Planning Commission, and so I would encourage, I don't know if you're going to have more opportunities, but I would encourage you all to and anybody who's going to be doing other ones, just to kind of learn, that's not as effective, right? So do lots of practicing and be able to articulate that more like you're just talking to the Planning Commission as opposed to reading a prepared statement. Because it lowers sort of the engagement and the energy level. But what you had to say was really good. I mean, you had good things to say. But just overall, I thought there was lots of references to the Land Development Code, the legal arguments, the planning principles on both sides of the community, and lots of facts. So I thought that was all very good. Questions? Yes.
Walmart, they brought up the pay in charities before we even started asking about it. Does that matter at all? Once they bring it up, should we just like, oh, that's something for them and let it go?
Okay, the question is it possible that it might mitigate some, adverse impact? So that's okay. But I think it's when you start sounding like you're making a decision only if they're going to give the money to the right charities or then that starts that you can't do that. I mean, I'm sorry, but you just
But following on that, how come if they're not allowed to consider that, it has to be strictly based on the land use nexus? How is Walmart allowed to make an economic development argument in the first place before these people.
Right, because you mean in terms of what they can afford to do and not?
No, I mean, just, broad sweeping statements about, revitalizing the neighborhood,
Oh,
things
no,
like that, without anything
No, you can
to.
ask about that. No, I'm talking about when you start getting into, is it gonna be this
Specifics.
charity versus that charity that gets the money, right?
Right, but they're talking about how, they made a point of talking about how much they're going to be paying the people working.
Yep, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so why are they allowed to make that argument, and
So,
if they can't consider that?
well, so they're, one, because they're the applicant, they're entitled to do what, there's no law that says you can't make this argument. But the land use nexus applies to the government in making its decision. So that's the basis, because they're exercising power. Generally, advocates, applicants, or people from the community, they get lots of latitude to say whatever they want. Partly it's First Amendment, free speech, it's right to petition the government and so forth. So they're gonna, a lot of times commissions will say, hey, that's not before us. Don't bring that up. When people bring up things that aren't relevant. But the Walmart is entitled to try to paint itself as a good citizen, whether it is or not. Residents are entitled to question or attack whether they're good citizens. That's totally fine. But if you're going to say, well, we're not going to give you a waiver because we don't believe you're going to pay these people $11 an hour, that's not a standard in the land development code, right? It's just not. So, yeah.
So, on the local consultant question, because I'm the one that asked that, when I was watching the actual videos, they were asking some questions about that, if they had talked with local architects or worked with local consulting firms, I guess just to make it seem like maybe that they were taking account into more of like the actual community and not just being like, well, this is our design,
Right.
this is straight from corporate, but we haven't talked to anyone in the community. Did I just maybe like poorly?
Yeah.
The delivery wasn't good. I guess it was like.
And when in the real world, they were in some danger zone there doing it too, right? So just because the real world does a B+ job doesn't mean that you want to aim for the B+ job, right? Sometimes the world does a D- job, right? That's just so just replicating what's done out there. The better question to ask is, have you gotten input on locally appropriate architecture, or have you gotten input on locally appropriate landscaping, right?
I guess that's what really was trying to get at.
Okay.
I just couldn't.
But with what you say, what you're saying is, we will only give you the approval if you hire a local firm to do your landscaping for you. That you can't do that. You just can't. Now if you said we're going to give you a grant from the city only if you use a local firm, you can do that because that's the city's money. They can condition it. Do you see what the difference is on that? Okay. Yes, sir.
I hate to ask a question because I want to get out there as much as everybody. One of the things that was mentioned was, well, we might give these waivers to local businesses, but maybe not Walmart.
Yes. Oh, that's really
that's a problem.
that's yes. I'm sorry. I knew there was one other thing in my notes somewhere, but I didn't want to pull anybody up. Yeah, no, that's a really bad one. Yeah. So there's lots of ways that the government can favor local. So again, who they give money to, lots of other things, programs, etc. But if you start saying, we are only going to give waivers if it's a local developer versus a national developer, that's a problem.
That they were giving these waivers because it was Walmart, and they wouldn't give these waivers necessarily to a local small guy who wants to put.
No, I think it had to do with the argument. It was Courier Journal and Nucleus, and I forgot what the other one was.
But I think the point he's making is like when some of us did point out like we're making an example out of Walmart. Is that not almost the same? It's like a reverse.
Yeah.
That's a discussion about because they're a huge corporation, they can bring in this business, but a small guy with a little restaurant that wants to be a parking lot in the front, we're going to deny him
Well, yes,
The
but,
Walmart made the argument that, you've already given these waivers to other businesses, and then they said, yeah, but those are, yeah, that was pre-existing.
oh, okay.
Well, yeah, the reasoning is pre-existing local and you're not.
Okay.
So, for what you were saying, I'm kind of the one that was like spearheading that part of the discussion. But it wasn't more about the fact that Walmart is this company that brings in a lot of money. It was about the fact that how big of a store it is, like the way that it fits. It just wasn't the same as a lot of the smaller stores in the same area. So that's kind of the point that I was making. Maybe it missed for you, I don't know. But
No, I mean, I get that. I think, for one commissioner had a great point that, okay, then that doesn't fit. And you can do like Covington had that 23-acre industrial site that didn't break up.
But there's lots of, I mean, you can deny it on the fact that it's enormous, right? I mean, okay, it doesn't matter whether it's Walmart or John Doe down the street who's putting in an enormous building with an enormous parking lot in front. You can deny it on that basis, right? But once you start saying, well, we're going to grant it or deny it because the company is local or they're national or whatever, that's not a legitimate basis. What you're doing is you're analyzing the effects. So that's more the problem.
Really quick, so is the commission allowed to even consider the amount of resources the applicant has? Like, can they even say,
Yeah, I think
well,
that's-
we have enough money, they could actually.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, you could say that, but what you're doing is you're really saying this is not an undue hardship on the applicant. But where's that coming from? It's coming from the very specific, precise language that says undue hardship on the applicant, right? Does everybody see not, undue hardship on big box retailers from other parts of the world that we don't like, right? I mean, right. Okay, so reminders. Your reflection paper due 5 o'clock on Monday by email. Okay, double spaced, 1-inch margins all the way around, 12-point type, at least 4, but not more than 6 pages. So between 4 and 6, not just a narrative of what happened. Don't just describe to me this happened, that happened. It is a reflection on your lessons learned. So you some deep analysis. And so there's in the syllabus, it talks about what kinds of things to focus on. The syllabus also, and that's on page 10 of the syllabus. On page 11 of the syllabus is the grading rubric. So if you're interested in exactly how well you can do on the reflection paper, it's right here. There's no mystery about it, okay? The main thing, again, I will emphasize is where people end up being less than happy with their course grade is when they are late and they lose the points just because it's late. So get it in by 5. I will email you that I got it. If you do not hear from me by 5:30, I got it. Then you can get in contact with me in some way. Yeah?